everybody. How is everybody tonight?
Good. Good to see
Yay!
Excellent.
you again.
We have a wonderful special guest tonight. I'm going to do just a little housekeeping before we get started, and then I'm disappearing and handing this off to our fantastic SCA Coaches Corner. So, for our viewers that are watching, you are definitely welcome and encouraged to ask questions. By all means, do so. Just drop them into the live comment box, and we will do our best to answer them. We are working within certain time limits, so don't take it personally if we can't get to anything and everything. But do try to keep it on topic if at all possible. And I think that is it from my part. So I'm going to disappear and hand this off to you, Duke Branos.
Great. I just want to welcome everybody again. And for any newcomers, we're happy to have you with us. This is kind of covering topics from things that people have asked us to cover and things we came up with ourselves. The Coach's Corner is here primarily to help people not only learn how to teach and review and become better at what we do in our sport, but also to hopefully help them through a long career with what we do. And that's why I'm excited about today's topic. I've dealt with good and bad within the injury prevention and the injury scenario. And we'll probably cover more of that tonight. I am Duke Branos out of the Middle Kingdom, been in a society for about 33 years. And I hope you guys have a good night listening to this stuff. And I look forward to listening to our guest. Sean?
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Duke Sean from the Kingdom of Artemisia. I've been a knight for 33 years now. Been training on a known world level for at least 15 years. I've been pretty fortunate throughout my career to not have a lot of injuries. This is something that comes up a lot. And so we're going to hopefully address some of these things. And tonight we have a special guest with us, Lord Attilius, who many of you may recognize from the 5 Methods broadcast for becoming a better fighter. He's had a number of high profile fighters online to get some ideas about how to become a better fighter. And you can find his Facebook page under 5 Methods. That's the number 5 Methods. So definitely find him. But Attilius is a physical trainer by trade with I believe, a Bachelor of Science in sports medicine. So we're definitely happy to have him and have his experience. So I'm going to let him introduce himself a little more briefly.
Hey guys, Lord Attilius, as he said, I've been fighting in the SCA for quite a while now, but I haven't actually taken my training to a significant level until last year with Duke Sean and Duke Timmer and a couple various knights that I've met online through the 5 Methods show. And Sir Bree's 100-day Pell Challenge group. If you haven't checked that out, you should. Get a really cool patch when you complete it. But for me, as Duke Sean said, I have been personal training for probably close to 7 or 8 years now. I've had hundreds of clients through all spectrums of injuries and weight loss and so on and so forth. I've also competed on a competitive level of Olympic lifting, and I recently started a class that is more specific to injury prevention and how to work through injuries if you do get them. And so I'm on week 5, and I'm really excited to share what I've learned with that, because I think it will very much benefit everybody in the game, especially those that have that shoulder that's kind of achy as they're doing their Pell work. So yeah, that's me. So let's get this show started.
Okay, so we're going to start with something of some cautionary tales, some injuries that Branos and I have experienced and witnessed throughout our time. Again, I personally have not had any chronic injuries through our sport, but I didn't have any martial experience, and I have very limited sports background before I started doing Pell work. When I was like 12 years old when I started doing Pell work, and I was very fortunate to have been taught good mechanics from the very beginning. So a lot of my longevity comes from from that. But I have had a couple of injuries that that I've gotten outside of SCA fighting that have later impacted my fighting. About 15 years ago, I had some rehab that I did on a shoulder injury that was one of the internal tendons. When I went to the physical therapist to get that checked out, they did all the basic testing for rotator cuff injury stuff, and they said it wasn't any of that, but there was just something going on, and so I did some physical therapy for that. And then about 4 years ago, I guess, I had an elbow injury. It was not golfer's elbow. It was not tennis elbow. Don't exactly know where it came from, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't fighting. And eventually just had to take a break to let that recover. So I've been pretty fortunate, but I've seen a lot of injuries, a lot of and preventable injuries, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about. So, Brownus has got some experience with personal experience with some of his injuries.
Yeah, it's I've early off. I have a black belt in Tang Soo Do as well. Had a pretty solid career early off in both the martial arts and the SCA. Probably was much more abusive in tournaments and in the martial arts when I first started, and probably my early lifting experiences and football experiences didn't help go live through that period of time. So I abused myself pretty bad prior to probably me hitting 21, 22 years old. In fact, my first shoulder surgery was after I was knighted, which was probably about 7 years into the SCA, out on belted champions battle at Pennsic, where my left shoulder was yanked down from my shield. What I learned from that experience was be very careful on who you trust with your health. There is one person that's responsible for your health, and that is you. Get educated, and that's what I'm hoping we're going to help you guys with today. I wish I was more educated. I had surgery, which was totally useless, and ended up after PT and surgery with frozen shoulder for about 20 years, until I met a student doctor who's finishing up school and getting her orthopedic and MD. She, in an hour, she had my shoulder back to about where I couldn't raise it above here for the last 20 years. Now, it's not perfect, but about 80% after an hour. And she did a couple more sessions on me. I quickly learned to found other orthopedic PT people. I'm lucky enough that we have a school here that teaches that. It's actually done a lot in Sweden. And it's more about what your muscles and tendons and things in your body should be able to do, and get in back so that they can do that. And I think, this is one of the most important pieces. Find somebody you trust. If you go to an MD that's specifically, a knee or a shoulder guy, it's all great. But remember, many MDs, unless they're sports related, will first think about surgery and second think about something else. Where if you go to somebody that has more of an orthopedic background, they will think about your body first, and then if they can't do something about surgery to try to help you. I also had tennis elbow early off. I have a huge shout out to Duke Gareth, who taught me that I didn't have to kick my sword back up to my shoulder so I could compete in crown tournaments, which I had been doing for about 2 years. If my sword dropped off in front of me, I could not lift it. I literally had to kick it to get it back up high enough so I could get it to my shoulder. And I actually didn't stop. What I did is learned a stretch, which is partially a yoga stretch, that actually stretched that tendon to a place where it allowed the inflammation in it to go down, and allowed the stretch so that it was long enough that it wouldn't inflame anymore. So again, these are things that good orthopedic and good prevention can help you with. And I wish I would have known that far earlier off in my career. I have other stuff. We'll talk about that. But for most part, Most of my things came around shoulders. Good massage therapist. I will shout out, and I'm sure many of you have seen him here, and that is Duke Rongalder. Allowed me to pretty much fight again, where my back was totally seized, and he does massage therapy. Tends to be very painful, but he works knots out, and he was a genius. It took me a lot to allow him to do that because I was stubborn, and every day he worked on me, I could do something different. So don't be stubborn like me. Be smart. Learn as much as you can, and find somebody you trust. Don't be afraid to walk out of an office and go to another one.
All right. That was a great introduction, you guys. Thanks for sharing all that information. So I'm going to share the screen really quick. Bear with me. I'm not very good with the whiteboard. So if it looks like a 3-year-old's doing it, that's probably true. So what we're going to be going over right now is load versus capacity. And this graph that I'm about to do is essentially how every injury in the history of humanity can be explained. And it goes something like this. All right, so you just have your basic graph there, and then this line over here is going to be your load. Okay, and then this line up here is your capacity line, okay? And hopefully everybody can see this okay. Can you guys see this okay so far?
It's looking good to me.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, so throughout the day, everybody starts with these 3 basic things. One is your anatomical defects, and that is pre-existing injuries like Duke Brownos' shoulder, his elbow, his back. Those are things that you can actually, begin to work with and change, but they're always going to be there. Okay. The next one is stress, diet, and sleep. And don't worry, I will write these out as soon as I get done if you guys are taking notes. And then the next one is your functional diagnosis. And this is where actually a trained professional comes in for that one. So again, no matter what you do, these are 3 things that you have power over, but you don't have as much power as you always have to deal with them, essentially. Okay, so we're going to call this one AD, okay, anatomical defects or dysfunctions. And then the next one is SDS. Let me see if I can move that over a little bit. And then the next one up here is functional diagnosis. All right. So again, going into your anatomical dysfunctions or defects, these could be surgeries that you had in the past, like they were talking about earlier. These could be even birth defects. You could have like a extra bone or something like that in your shoulder joint or in your elbow that prevents you from getting full extension, moving all around. Those things are just things that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Stress, diet, and sleep. Obviously, if you take care of yourself and if you do like daily meditations or stress relieving things, this box can get smaller, but it's never going to go away. If you eat perfectly and you have a really good diet, obviously then it's going to get smaller as well. And then the same thing with sleep. If you're getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep and then waking up and drinking 25 ounces of coffee, obviously that's going to have a heavy toll on your body. Now, the functional diagnosis is where it's not a medical diagnosis, so don't take it as that. What that does is if you're working with a PT or a physical therapist, personal trainer, or something like an orthopedic person, typically they'll run you through a series of assessments to see how well you move, how flexible you are, how much mobility you have, and they're looking for deficiencies in your right and left side. And if they find something, if you move better on one side versus the other, then it's our job to see that and correct that. So then what's going to happen is you wake up the morning and this is you, okay? Then you go to work for, I guess I should probably add a box. You go to work for 8 hours, and then after work, let's say you have fighter practice, okay? And then after fighter practice, you want to go hit the Pell, and then you have some yard work to do after that. And then before you know it, you're passing up your capacity line, and that's where your injury comes from. Now, again, they don't have to go in this order, so bear with me on it, okay? So all of us, or most of us, work 8 hours a day, okay? And then fighter practice or working out, whatever it is whatever you do, fighter, we'll just say FP/workout, okay? And then, we'll even go, for the sake of keeping this SEA related, we'll say you do your yard work after you get done with fighter practice, okay? And then you're like, oh man, my night told me I have to hit the Pell today and work on this. And then you start hitting the Pell and you notice your shoulder starts to ache and it just hurts really bad and you don't know what's going on. So what this is telling you is your load has exceeded your capacity in that shoulder joint or that knee joint or that lower back, whatever it is. And you're now potentially injured. So the goal of this is to you can write this out for yourself and kind of see where you're at with it. And the goal is to actually kind of get these things, your first three, your functional diagnosis, your SDS, and your anatomical dysfunctions, smaller. Okay, so like Duke Branos was saying, you could with your anatomical defects, you can actually do some of the things he suggested and some of the things that we're going to suggest later on, and get these three boxes a lot smaller. Okay, you can actually decrease them by at least half. If you get more sleep at night or better quality sleep at night, you can lower that. If you eat better, if you eat a good source of protein, carbohydrates, and your fruits and vegetables that nobody wants to eat, those are going to help make your box smaller. And then if you start working with a trained professional and you actually get these functional diagnoses and you let us help you train properly to get strength balance back into your body, help you work on your mobility, obviously you're going to be throwing shots better. You're going to feel better, you're going to be stronger, and your shoulder is going to actually be able to maintain that. And then you're going to go to work for 8 hours, okay, which is a big one. It takes a toll on everybody. And then you go to fighter practice, okay, and then it's smaller, and then your significant other's like, hey, you got to go mow the lawn or cut down that tree or whatever. And then you do that. And then before you know it, your Pell work is also good. Now, things that you can do at fighter practice or at the Pell is practice proper mechanics, which we always hear in every single one of these videos that anybody ever posts is proper mechanics, proper mechanics, proper mechanics. And if you do that, obviously your workout box and your functional or your fighter practice box and your Pell box are going to get smaller. And then before you know it, you are below your capacity line. So that's your load versus capacity. So hopefully that made some sense. If you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in, or if you have something to add, Branos or Sean, feel free to add to it.
So I think you're nailing it on the head. And even inside your practice and your Pell work, or even your workout, you may find that there are times that you have to reduce the amount of effort you're putting there. Mm-hmm. And that means I have gone, because of my shoulders, I have gone to half of my fight practice, sometimes even more, depending on what my capacity is yep. to fight with foam. Mm-hmm. I think we miss that part in the society. I spend a great deal of time now with a lot of students fighting with foam. And then we add 30% of the practice with rattan to make sure they understand the weight. But the foam allows you to focus on technique and not power. Mm-hmm. And with technique will come power with that rattan. So you mix those two together, you reduce the size of that box, but you get all the other dynamics involved. And I think that's a big part, and I think it fits right inside of what you're talking about here, and that is, your capacity line may actually reduce itself in some cases because of an injury. You just can't go as far. That injury, that injury box gets bigger, so now you're way over capacity on other things. So just beware. There are a lot of methods to still keep doing what you're doing, but do them smarter.
Yeah, I can't really add much more to that. You're doing some great stuff there. So.
Yep. And then moving forward a little bit further, at the end of the day, the end game goal is also to increase your capacity line, to make this go up, okay, to make that higher so you can actually do more. And that comes from training, really, outside training of not just doing fighter practice and pel work all the time. That comes from physical training, taking time to work out, to build strength training, to work on your flexibility, to work on your cardio, and so on and so forth. So that's how you increase your capacity line. But yeah, so that's all I've got for your load versus capacity graph. And so if you can stay below your capacity, then you're good. If you start to reach above it, that's when you're going to start getting your injuries, when you're overclocking yourself, when you're over exerting yourself. And most of the time we don't even realize it. So
I think this is where you come to the point where you got to listen to yourself, right? I mean, I think you agree with there, and that you got to listen to your body and work within what you can do. There are going to be maybe times that you do have to take time out, but be careful on that as well, because just taking time out by itself doesn't always fix the problem that you have. So talk to somebody and they'll help you with that. And they'll tell you, okay, these are the exercises maybe you shouldn't do for a little while, or drop the amount that you do. But to totally stop doesn't help you, because then those doesn't help you all the time. If you totally stop, then that capacity line will come down, because your endurance and all of those things that you just talked about by pushing capacity will also come down.
Yep.
So you got to be very careful with that.
Exactly.
Yeah. When I had my elbow injury 4 years ago, it was good mechanics that allowed me to continue fighting, but it just never had time to recover. So I wasn't doing more damage to it, but I wasn't allowing it to recover either. And, you take a week off and you think that's enough, and it's not. And, I think I had to take maybe 6 weeks off of fighting. And, you got to listen to your body at some point. And it's one thing to kind of push through. And, one of the things we're always talking about, is, pushing through pain or whatever is, there's that age old question of, are you hurt or are you injured? And if you're injured, you need to stop fighting and take care of that. If you're hurt, you got a bruise, you got a boo-boo, you can kind of push through that and get through a practice, but don't, listen to your body, and don't let machismo get in the way of good recovery. And if you're hurt, if you're injured, stop fighting. All right, so let's move on to the training pyramid then.
Okay, you got it. All right, so the training pyramid, we'll go back to share screen because it's fun. It is basically just a pyramid that looks like that, as a toddler would draw it, okay? And the base, now this is the most important one out of everything, okay? This is where most, or if not all, personal training should begin with, is flexibility. If I knew how to spell. Okay. Now, with flexibility is by definition, it is the ability for a joint to passively reach full range, and it's assisted by gravity or a load or external force to reach your full range of motion. So if you take your elbow, right, gravity is assisting me to open my elbow all the way up, okay, right? That means you have to have some flexibility in your bicep and your elbow tendons and your wrist, so on and so forth. And then the next level is, oh, hey, I can do a straight line. Who knew? The next line is mobility. Okay. And mobility is, try to think of mobility as how actively flexible you are. So if you think of like oh my gosh, a cheerleader doing a jump split and then landing into the splits, that's mobility. And versus falling into a split, that's flexibility. So if they, or I mean, if they like slide into it, obviously then that's flexibility. And then mobility is if they just go right down into it. Make sense? Hopefully. Okay. And then the next one, I don't need that one. The next one up is, let's see. Yeah, strength balance. Strength/balance. And strength/balance is how well your joints move actively or passively, and how well our joints transmit and absorb force through them. And it's a very important factor when it comes to your joint health. And when you have one particular muscle group that is stronger than another particular muscle group, then that's when you get one side is going to be overclocking and the other one is not going to be doing its job properly, and then you're also going to get injuries that way as well. Okay. And then the next one, okay, up is volume and recovery. And we've already touched base on this one a little bit. Branos was saying, and Duke Sean was saying, if you need to take a break, take a break. And if you'll know if you're doing too much. If you're doing too much pale work every day, or if you're doing too much of this, or you're doing too much fighting, you're gonna know deep down inside that you're having issues with it. Okay. And then the last one, and this is probably the most, I mean, it's important, but it's also the last thing that you need to worry about in terms of fighting, I think. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys are the experts in fighting, is skill and motor control. And as we go through this, okay, so we'll just put it up there so you can see it. So you start with flexibility, and if your body can't move the way it's supposed to, then it's going to throw every single one of these above it out of whack. So that's where you focus on, like, making sure you have full range of motion in your joints, you have full mobility, and then you go into full mobility, just making sure that you can move properly without speed and without forcing your, we'll use a flat snap, for example. If you can't throw a proper flat snap at a slow tempo without a stick, or without something forcing your hand into position, then you shouldn't be throwing a flat snap, because that is going to throw off everything above this. And no matter how much skill and how much motor control you have, at the end of the day, you're going to cause injuries. Okay. So I always start with flexibility. And if you don't know whether or not, you have good flexibility, or you don't know how to tell the difference, get with somebody in your area. I'm looking at doing Zoom meetings for these particular assessments to help find these in the near future. But moving forward, you're going to go into, with flexibility, and you're going to get, there's two terms that go around a lot in your muscle tissue. There's tightness, and tightness is how something feels. It's a sensation. So like when you feel like something's tight and you need to stretch it, 9 times out of 10, you don't actually need to stretch it. Because if you think about a muscle, when it feels tight, it's actually, you're assuming that it feels like it's balled up and it's preventing you from moving correctly, right? But in fact, if it's actually tight, it means the muscle is stretched out already, between your tendons and between the joint that's moving, the two joints that are moving. So if you're feeling tightness, you should actually try to work it out. And again, if you don't always consult with somebody before you just go and start working out. So bear with me on this. And then shortness is actually the sensation that you should be stretching it out. So when it's something short and it's balled, your muscle tissue's balled up inside there, that's when you need to stretch it out. So The best way to tell the difference between tightness and shortness is if something's tight, you can still stretch your body or whatever muscle's tight. We'll say the bicep right now. If it's tight, you can get full range of motion, and out here is where it feels tight. It should always feel tight when you have full range of motion. And if it feels tight here, that doesn't mean it needs to be stretched. Okay. And shortness, if your muscle was short, you would go like this, and then you couldn't get full extension in your elbow. Making sense so far for flexibility? Hopefully. Okay. And then, like I said, mobility, when you think about mobility, think about how actively flexible you are. Think about a jump split versus falling into a split for flexibility. We're going to go into a little bit of lack of range versus lack of control. If we lack mobility somewhere, we have minor imbalances. So if one muscle's overclocking or one muscle's not working correctly the way that it should be, then that's where mobility comes in, and you need to start working on a little bit more, like fine tuning what's tight and what is short. If it's short, obviously you need to stretch it. If it's tight, then you need to work it out. Or like if your bicep's tight, you do bicep curls and it shortens it up and gets rid of that tightness, is what I'm trying to say. So this is where it's when you start to loading lots of volume or intensity on our dysfunctional bodies that problems begin to occur. So when you start doing stuff and you don't have proper mobility and you don't have proper flexibility, like I said before, that's when you're going to start to have these issues. That's where your shoulder's going to start to hurt. That's where your lower back's going to hurt. It's where your knees are going to start to hurt if you don't have proper knee flexibility or you don't have these proper flexibility and mobility. And then, so once you get those and achieve those, that's when you start to add your volume and load into your strength balances. And that's where you kind of start to develop which muscles aren't working together. The best way to think about the body, honestly, is think of it like a cable. Everything, when one thing pulls in a cable, they all pull together. Your body is the same way. And if it can't do something, if one particular muscle isn't doing the job that it's supposed to be doing, then that's when the body adapts and it makes something else do that that's not necessarily supposed to do that. Okay. So when that starts to happen, and that's where your imbalances come from, that's where stuff that doesn't work properly in this muscle that's actually a weaker muscle that's over here is like, oh man, I have to do all this work. But this big muscle that's over here, the one that's supposed to be doing the work, doesn't. So this little muscle here gets overclocked and injury. So that's where strength balance comes in, is kind of balancing out all the muscle tissue throughout your body to make it work properly and more efficiently. Once you have proper strength balance, then that's when you start to begin to add volume to your workouts, to your pel work. I don't ever suggest doing full impact pel work, but if you could essentially do that, but don't. Okay. That's when if you're working out a lot, that's when you start to lift heavier weights essentially, or if you're a runner, you start to run faster or for longer distances, and you do volume. And then you also have to focus strictly on your recovery, as Duke Branos and Sean were saying previously about if you're starting to feel like you're overdoing it, you're going to know, and that's when you should probably take a break. Okay. And lastly, if you have skill, if you have all of these below, that's when you can get into your skill and motor control. So if a joint has full flexibility, full strength throughout that full range of motion, if it has balanced strength capacity across the joint, balanced and absolute strength and stamina, and appropriate loading and rest is scheduled. When you're doing your volume and recovery, this is where it comes in handy to work with a Duke or a Knight or somebody that can help you balance that out. So, I mean, if you think about it, again, going back to the flat snap, I mean, Sean, you can answer this one. Do you think if somebody has all of these bottom ones, do you think that you're going to need to cue that, like give them like a cue on how to throw their flat snap?
Yeah, not really. I mean, if you have all of those things in place already, then the mechanics to throw a basic flat snap, you know, there's not. I mean, I can give you the basic instruction on there, and we don't have to troubleshoot your flexibility and your strength balance, and we don't have to, you know, we don't have to figure out which one of those things is keeping you from being able to deliver the basic mechanic.
Yep,
So yeah, if you have
exactly.
all those things in place, it makes everything that much easier.
Perfect. Exactly it. So, so I mean, let's say this fighter walks onto the field the first day. I mean, and you guys can attest to this. I'm sure you've seen it. You know these fighters that have all of these that are perfect, tip-top shape. I would even say like Duke Dietrich, because he's the fitness guru. He walks out on the field. You see that he has beautiful technique, and he just cleans house. And then you see the other fighters, that the ones that are missing, we'll say 1, 2, or 3 steps, 1, 2, or 3. They don't have good technique, and we may or may not be able to cue them into a good day of fighting. If we do, does that mean, I mean, if you have to cue somebody and coach them through the proper technique time and time again, does that mean they have good technique? Either one of you guys can chime in on that one. If I need to repeat it, I can.
Yeah, I think you might want to put the question a little better together.
Yep, no problem. So you can always tell the difference between the fighters with the pyramid here, the triangle that we're going over, right? So Duke Dietrich being a fitness guru, and watching his fights, he has like pristine technique. And then you kind of see the new fighters, like if we're out on the field and you see these new fighters, and the way to tell that they're missing 1, 2, or 3 here is if you have to continually coach them. Like if you have to continually tell them, hey, get that tip to dip back down, and they're just struggling through it. And then you notice the next time that they come to practice or you see them on the field, you have to do it again.
So some of that, yeah, I get where you're coming from now. I think the biggest piece what we see here is if you have these foundational pieces, that skill and motor control piece is far easier to teach, and we don't have to spend as much time in there space. And you know, even if you don't have these things, you're gonna be gaining all of these as you go along. But if you totally miss out on some of these, then it becomes harder on these top ones to get you to where you can compete with the guys that have a better foundation than you. And that's what you're talking about, Dietrich. He has that foundation, and he's built that foundation all the way up. There's always going to be time when we have to adjust people's technique because it's natural. But there's also in a case where I was working with His Grace Raumwalder, where we realized that he had lost enough strength that he was having trouble with some movement stuff. And he, you know, it took a little while to figure it out. He did a wonderful job regaining that strength relatively quickly, and he recognized it, fixed that, and got right back into the game again. And you know, that's the type of, you know, any of these things can vary over time. You have to be, if you're trying to stay on top of the game and keep pushing your, you know, that capacity of what you do in their game or the level of your fight, then these are fundamental pieces that you should definitely understand, you know, where you fit and how well it is that you do these things. Because even if you're not necessarily super flexible, adding, and you're a great fighter, adding more flexibility will add to your life of fighting as well as the foundation of your fighting. And I think that's the piece to remember here, not only for building a great fight, but for maintaining that fight over, you know, like Sean, 40 years, right?
Yep. Pretty much it. Hit the nail on the head for me. Thank you. So this goes out to all the coaches and all the knights out there that are teaching people. My best advice, and again, take this from a lowly lord that has just barely started training. I mean, significantly training fighting. This goes out to you. You know, the people you cue over and over again. I mean, if you, like we were just talking about, and they just can't seem to get that angle of that shot, or they just can't hit the right positions that you're looking for in that flat snap or that wrap, or they just don't seem to qualitatively do what you want them to do. Come back to this pyramid and check out what's going on with it, because something that's going on inside their flexibility, mobility, or their strength balance could be the underlying issue as to why they can't get that 90 in their elbow as they're throwing that flat snap, or they're trying to get that wrist twist as they're coming around, or they just can't quite get their hips to move the way you want it to. Come back to this and check it out and make sure that there could be something else besides what's going on inside their technique. So with that's really the pyramid that I have, and the load versus capacity we went over. So that's
well,
it.
And let's leave this here for 1 second.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
and really, I think you nailed you really hit a point, and that is, we all can learn to be better coaches.
Mm-hmm.
We can all learn to be better trainers, and these are the type of classes that we're sitting in right now. I'm learning, right? Yeah. And I look at this pyramid, and by taking a hard look at this, it's like, okay, we need to do a better job at tracking these things, and maybe even defining those things on our end, on the coach's corner, maybe defining these things and how we recognize them, so that coaches can help. We can help the coaches see where some of those places are.
Mm-hmm.
We spend a lot of time inside of, I don't spend enough time inside of flexibility and mobility. We do spend a good bit of time inside of strength, volume and recovery, and lots of skills controls. So, by balancing your practice, you're going to just create a better fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to push that level constantly up. But these are the foundation items that, if you want to be a good coach and you want to help somebody, start here and take a good look at this, and do maybe later we'll talk about breaking these out a little bit so we can identify them and help coaches identify them, and maybe even go through some exercises so to help them understand where people might be missing some things, so that these people can work on the pieces they really need. But this is a really good beginning for, I think, coaches to think about their students.
Yeah, one of the things that we see in particularly newer coaches is they forget that their body doesn't know what it's like to not know how to do this. So we find people that go out there and they're trying to teach people stick mechanics, and they say, you just do it like this, and they demonstrate it and they do it. But when the student can't perform those functions for whatever reason, that's when we need to look at this. And as coaches, when we say, throw the shot like this, and that person can't do that for whatever reason, it's probably related to one of those bottom three things on the pyramid.
That's
okay,
pretty much
so before we get into the things we can do to kind of prevent these things, Vesper, do we want to see if there's any questions out there related to anything we've covered so far?
We do.
All right.
There is a question regarding load versus capacity, that graph in particular. Are there different graphs? Is there like a different capacity graph depending on a certain type of body part, or is it just overall?
That's just overall. Yep. So I mean, if you're breaking it down into, if you want me to break it down a little bit further, think of like on your work day, or your 8-hour work day. If you're like an electrician or somebody that's working overhead all the time like this, obviously that's going to put a lot more strain on your shoulder. And then you go home and you do pel work. Guess what's going to happen? Your shoulder's going to be overclocked already, and then you're going to be adding more volume and load onto it by going through the mechanics. And if you don't have good mechanics already, you're just, that's where these injuries are coming from. So it's not specific to one body part, it's specific to you as a whole.
Thank you. I think that was it for now. There are a couple of questions that I was going to hold off on until we get to orthopedic work, but
Yeah, I think
Oh,
we're
well,
going to be
good.
covering some of this stuff here in a minute. So one of the biggest things we can do to prevent injuries in our sport is first and foremost, I mean, besides conditioning, as Attilius was talking about, but one of the things we can do that is specific to our sport is just good body mechanics, good stick mechanics, and also, I mean, shield work and footwork and just good mechanics in general. One of the most common injuries that we have in our sport is shoulder injuries. Partially because I mean, we're, especially sword and board fighters, we're throwing that one arm with the stick, you know, hundreds of times a night in a 3-hour practice, and so that's one of the most common injuries we have is in the shoulder, and oftentimes those shoulder injuries come from poor mechanics to begin with. One of the things that I talk about as far as preventing, I mean, the stick mechanics that I teach are specifically designed to be kind to your body. And one of the things that I talk about in particular on that is a concept that we refer to as arm and moment. It's a principle of physics, and it has to do with load. If the further away your hand gets from your core, out to your side, whatever you're holding in your hand, the heavier that object is going to be, because the moment arm is heavier, and you have that fulcrum point that is going to be pulling down. So if I've got a gallon of milk in my hand, if I hold it right in here by my core, I can hold it here almost indefinitely. But as I start moving away from my body, it starts that load becomes heavier and heavier because it's further away from my core and my shoulder. The way we see this in fighting is when somebody is trying to throw a shot, especially trying to throw a wrap, and they end up throwing their arm clear out to the side, and then they're trying to pull it around after that. That's one of the most common things that we have, and you have to understand that even with a 2-pound stick in your hand, the further away it gets from your core, the heavier that is. And if you're trying to bring it around after that, you're putting a lot more stress on that rotator. And that rotator joint is a very delicate, very complex joint. It is not a weight-bearing joint or muscle group. The whole purpose of your rotator is simply to keep your arm from flying out of the socket. It's not designed to carry that kind of load. And so as you put your arm further out, whether you're throwing a wrap or a flat snap or whatever, you put your arm out here to the side, and then you're trying to bring it around, you're putting a lot more stress on that right there. So good mechanics. I know when we're talking about keeping your hands closer to your core, this is what, and I think Bronos can correct me on the terminology on this. Boxers refer to that as keeping it in the quarters. You've got your shoulder points right here, and if you can keep your hands relatively within those the quarters, you can get stick rotation on your sword. You can get the tip moving outside of the quarters without having your hands go further away from your body. And as you're driving your sword forward, that's going to stay within the quarters as well. But if you can kind of keep it within your shoulders, you're minimizing the amount of risk that you have going out. Bronos, did you have anything else on that?
Yeah, I think you kind of nail it. You know, most of, and as time has gone on, excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So as time goes on, sometimes we have to make adjustments because of disabilities you have. I think the key you talk about is throwing within those shoulders, or at least very close to those shoulders, and going farther outside those shoulders gets more and more difficult. Some people believe that's where power is generated, like a baseball bat. But even with a baseball bat, you'll find that when people swing that, there's power at the end of it, but the hands are in front of them. Their shoulders are inside. And that's a very important part of what we're talking about. So, you know, some of those times when your arm is up, even throwing offsides and they're hanging and you're pulling, or when you throw a lot of wraps, you have a limited number of those things that you can do. There are some people I've seen with incredible flexibility and mobility that allow them to do that better. But be very careful that they have worked over time to be able to do that. Just going out there right away and doing it is very difficult and very abusive on your body sometimes. I know, I look, and even before doing this session, I'm like, I don't know if I should be part of that session. I've abused myself so bad over the years, and I have not been nice to my body. I have trained constantly, even through injuries, which is stupid. But in the end here, I thought I have a lot to talk about, and some of that is now maintenance. And I had labrum issues in my right shoulder, and the shoulder itself is a really complex joint, and this is the reason why replacement shoulders are not great. Replacement knees, wonderful. Replacement shoulders, it's a hanging joint. The labrum itself in my shoulder had been torn up, which caused my back muscles to take over to hold that shoulder in place, which caused my ribs to essentially stop floating and my shoulder blade to stop moving, which caused a slew of problems all the way through. So these are the kinds of things that you have to think about as you're going through your path of, okay, what is going on? Find people to make sure you do check those things, and go to a PT or orthopedic person and have them, sports doctor, have them evaluate. I had somebody doing the personal trainer who gave me some wonderful stretches to work. And those are the kind of things we have to continue. But stylistically, you may not be able to throw like some great people throw some beautiful shots. I look at them and I go, ooh, I wish I could throw that. I throw now, very few offsides and very few wraps. And that was my bread and butter when I was coming up. So just be careful on the amount that you're putting on anything. And again, if you do want to practice, practicing slow is far safer to do those things. And practicing with foam will allow to lighten that up and not put as much stress on those muscles in your shoulders, and still allow you to develop good technique. So all of those things can extend your lifetime, and that extension of lifetime helps you master more and more of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much, those two guys nailed proper mechanics. I mean, to a T. Obviously, they have the experience to do so. So, to kind of capitalize on something Sean was saying about having the milk jug here versus holding it way out here, you could do it with a pencil. So if you take a pencil, any kind of pencil, and you just hold it out here, palm up, keep it nice and tight, nice and just relaxed. Just hold it out there for as long as you can versus holding it out here. You'll see exactly what he's talking about. So, but other than that, that's all I have to add to that. So.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about some specific exercises that you can do, or some things you can do to increase that flexibility, to strengthen your joints and flexibility, to prevent injury to begin with, besides just good mechanics. So I think I'm going to hand this off to Bronos to talk about some of the orthopedic work that he's been doing.
So a lot of this orthopedic work really comes down to not so much, and even on my end, I learned just the other day, and I had heard it before, but I just didn't listen well. We go out a lot of times before things and just jump into stretching and try to stretch everything out as hard as we can. And that's actually not very efficient and not actually good for what you're doing. You're better off going ahead and doing really slow work to warm those muscles up and allow those things to get lubricated in your arms and and joints, and then go into fighting. And then stretching actually should be when everything is very warm at the end to allow for more flexibility. You'll get more flexibility that way. For my shoulders, there's a couple of great videos out there. There's tons of great videos online. Well, I'll post a couple of people doing some exercises in the Coach's Corner, specifically on this thread that we'll be posting with the YouTube video. But a lot of it is, again, really slow work, but it's all about just being able to get your shoulders where they're supposed to be, nice and back. And I'm going to cover that for a second. And then just slowly raising them and dropping them, you know, and getting that motion going allows your muscles to extend through the full range of its motion a little bit more every time you do it. It's not about stretching into those. You don't want to be like I'm going to get this to do it now. That's not what you want. You want to go ahead and do it nice and slow. And each time you do a set of 15. And by the end, you'll find that you have more of a stretch than you did before because your joints have been warmed up. I want to give you an example, and I ran into this problem. And we lots of us who sit at a desk and type all day have this same problem. We overdevelop our front side shoulders considerably on both arms. What happens is our backs don't. And when you're forward, your shoulders are forward on a keyboard all day, your outreach and grabbing stuff all day, all of that is front shoulder work. Balance, which we were talking about earlier, is about, you know, maybe you need to go to the gym, or maybe you need to find a couple exercises for your back muscles so that they naturally pull these shoulders back. Because what happens is those shoulders come forward, they are no longer in that same place they're supposed to be rotating in. Now you're actually hurting yourself. A lot of times, I'm going to show you my hands, but if you're walking around and you find, you can do this right now. In fact, if you rotate your full shoulders forward, you'll find that your hands see the back of your hands. They'll be just like this in front of you. All right. And some people may not be able to do this, but if you roll those shoulders back, your hands will be like this on the sides of you. And that's really important because that's where your shoulders are supposed to be. And what you'll find working out, and this actually helped me considerably by developing more strength in my back and shoulders, back shoulders, not front. I went from naturally having my shoulders turn forward to rolling them back because those muscles pull them back into the right place, balance the front to the back. And now my shoulders have a normal rotation that really, I mean, we're born with, hopefully. So there's little things like that that make a world of difference. And I think this is just about being educated about those things. So.
Tilius, do you have any specific exercises that you recommend for preventing injury for our sport?
Yeah, I could go into that all day and all night.
That's why we hired you.
Yeah, right. So to kind of capitalize on what Branos was saying, like when you're thinking of shortness and tightness, like we went over, he did a prime example. When you shrug your shoulders forward, or like you said, you're sitting at a desk typing like this all day, your front shoulder muscles and your chest muscles are going to be short because they're contracted, they're like this, and your back muscles are going to be tight. Your back shoulder muscles are going to be tight. So that's what, when I was saying you have to work out with something. Sorry, my daughter just fell over. Are you okay? Yeah. Okay. She's okay. So, you have to work those back muscles out to get them to shorten up, to get that strength. And that's what's going to pull your back into position, like you said. And I'm over exaggerating it a little bit just to show you what we're talking about. And then you stretch the front to get it to loosen up. So when you're feeling something that's tight, it may not necessarily mean what you think it means. So I do have a video that I posted on YouTube that is specific to SCA heavy combat. It's pretty much a 12-minute workout. It's an AMRAP. It's based off CrossFit, and it's a kettlebell or dumbbell or milk jug high pull. So from standing, I'm not going to stand up because I'll be off camera. You're going to hold whatever it is between your legs, and then you're just going to pull it up nice and high, nice and slow. Okay. Like you're saying, if you have injuries, if you're feeling your shoulder is hurt already, or it's feeling tender from previous pel work or fighting or injuries or stuff like that, take it slow. Time under tension is could potentially fix that. But if it hurts too much, if it's on like a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most pain you've ever experienced in your life, you're going to want it to be less than 5. If it gets over 5, shut it down. And obviously, you know your body more than I do. If you're not comfortable doing it, obviously don't do it. And if you want somebody, I would even suggest Duke Branos out there. If you want somebody to help you through these with proper technique or anything like that, we're here to help you with that. The next one would be a kettlebell or dumbbell or milk jug or whatever you have laying around the house, shoulder press. So what you see a lot of people do, and this goes back to what Sean was saying, is they'll bring that shoulder out and then they'll press it overhead. Keep that elbow tucked in, just like you're holding your sword. Nice, and you want a little bit of contact between your bicep and your tricep into your pec. And then you're just going to go up, okay, and then back down nice and slowly. At end range, when you're at the top of the motion, I know you can't really see my ear, but you want that bicep in line with that ear, so it's straight above your head. Again, nice and slow, okay? This workout particularly also has some bent knee hollow holds. You're just gonna have to watch the workout video for me to show you that, because I can't do it from the chair. And then last is some push-ups. Those 3 or 4 main things are gonna work pretty much everything that you're gonna be using in throwing the majority of your SCA shots. So you're going to be focusing a little bit on the back shoulder. You're going to be focusing on the front shoulder, a little bit into your trapezius right here, going into your neck muscles. You're going to be focusing on that trunk. That's your waistline, where you're throwing from your hips. And then your push-ups obviously is going to focus in on the chest to kind of help balance all that stuff out. So I will post a link like Branos in the comments when we're done with this video. And if you're looking for a good workout, I wouldn't do it every day. Maybe every 3 days or something like that, you can throw it in there. And I'm working on getting more videos like that up to help people out. You can find it on my YouTube page. Just when you go to YouTube, look up Attilius Primus Castus, and there's all kinds of 5 methods videos, there's workout videos, all kinds of crazy stuff going on there. So those are my main things to start for beginners. And if you need further help, I mean, don't hesitate to reach out, you guys, because I'm here to help anybody.
Yeah, one of the exercises that I did when I had to rehab my shoulder, again, I didn't have any structural damage at the rotator. There was just one of the muscles inside. It was one of those things, again, when they did all the stress testing for, can you do this, and move your arm like this, it was basically one of those things where it was one of those, doctor, it hurts when I do this. And there was this range of motion where I was reaching back to the back seat to get my son. And so that's all I could tell him was like, it hurts when I do this. One of the series of exercises that they gave me for that during the rehab, which really helped out a lot, was a set of shoulder exercises that they refer to as the crosses. And basically what it is, you can do this with resistance bands, or if you have if you go to a gym where they have the pulleys in the gym, where you can pull down. So basically it's you there's a series of crosses. So you'll take the one pulley this way with the weight on it, and you'll pull it across your chest this way. And then same thing with the other side. And then you'll start from the bottom, from the ground up, and you'll pull it up this way. Attilius might be able to explain this a little bit better, but it's basically you're pulling down into this way, and then you're pulling up across this way, and it just crosses your shoulders, and it strengthens the muscles in the shoulders to pull through. And I know we're covering a lot of shoulder exercises, but honestly, that's where the biggest problems that we run into our sport, because that's, again, that's, we're throwing with the sword, and that's those are the muscle groups that have to make that happen. And, you know, we talk all the time about, you know, good hip rotation to drive, to get the stick moving and to drive and all that. But that, you know, the breakdown comes from, you know, you can start from the ground up and you can drive everything through the hip. But then if your arm is out of control and you're just, you know, flinging your arm out there, then that's going to put more of that stress on all of those joints. Your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist, all of those things are going to be impacted if you're not using good mechanics. And those are where most of the injuries come from.
I think on that note, I think, you know, we can talk about knees a little bit. You know, for a while, I thought I had some knee issues. I've been lucky enough to not, but a couple of things go into knees. You got to be a little careful. You know, the good part about knees is they're a relatively strong joint. It's a knee on knee joint, or a bone. You know, there's cartilage in here, but this is what we have, and they press into each other. It's not a pulling joint like a shoulder is. So this is why the shoulder essentially is so weak. But you know, we will start with that hip push. And there's fundamentals that also can stress your knee. So you could push your hip, but if your foot is solid on the ground and your knee is rotating, you're going to stress your knee. This is the reason why people talk about being on the balls of their feet when they do things. Because if you're on the ball, that ball rolls with your knee, and that way that knee is not over the outside of your foot. You want that knee in line or even inside a little bit. As soon as it gets out here, we add weakness. So you have to be very, very careful with that. If you find yourself outside that foot often, I would suggest you really strongly take a look at what you're doing and maybe adjust it to figure out how to bring that foot back underneath it, so you have that stack, that good long stack of joints all together, like the way we're supposed to. My knee, for a while, I thought I would have to use a cane a little bit. What I found, and it was a little scary because the internet just threw it at me, or Facebook threw it at me, and it was that I had a sciatica issue. And some of that comes from, I do a lot of ground and motion and footwork, and a lot of deep footwork. So that sciatica it's really common inside of hockey goalies and things like that, who are always down all the time. And I found that after a couple of weeks of somebody telling me, and then a couple of weeks of stretching it, my knee didn't hurt anymore. And you know, that sciatica runs, not only can it run right up into your back, which I had to do once, which was incredibly painful, but it also runs down all the way around your knee, almost into your calf. So beware. And I had actually been dealing with that problem for years. I feel like my knee was weak, and then I'd just be a little careful, move a little less, make sure my feet were lined correctly. But you could, again, here's an example of where simple stretches, and again, you don't have to power into those stretches, but stretching it, warming it up early allowed me to get to a place where that pain went away. And you know, I really, you know, haven't had that issue. And when it does start coming back, I work on it a little harder. These aren't things that we're telling you have to do every day. In fact, some things you don't want to do every day. But doing them, like Phyllis said, doing them a couple times a week will make you a better fighter, make that time that you have in the SCA longer. We have a wonderful sport that allows us to compete. You know, I look at Sean competing very competitively after 40 years. You know, I've been competing for 33 years in that space. So we have that space to do that, and we can compete even with the 20-year-olds. But to do that, you've got to be smart. And I would suggest get smarter faster than I did. And that's why I was excited to have this show here. So.
All right, that's where let's see if there's any more questions out there before we wrap up.
Sounds good. Question about back pain, scoliosis, and also lower back pain. mostly unrelated to scoliosis. What can this person do to minimize the effect of those?
You want me to? I can take this one. Honestly, when it comes to lower back pain, it could be any number of things. Most of the time with lower back pain, it's actually not in your lower back; it's from your legs, specifically in your glutes. And one thing that I was going to bring up while we were talking to bring up with Branos is with your knee or when you're throwing from your hips and into your shoulder. Obviously, your hips, your quads, hamstrings, glutes, and your core trunk area. That's your powerhouse, and those are the major muscle groups. And so when those get shortened or tightened, that can cause a lot of issues in your lower back. So you could look into that. As for the scoliosis, I can't, as a professional, tell you what to fix without actually looking at you and going through an assessment. That if I were to give you advice and then you were to take it and I messed it up even further, I could get in a lot of trouble for that. So if you want to do like an assessment with me or something like that, add me on Facebook or message me directly, and we can go over those kinds of things. Otherwise, we could spend all night trying to help people with their injuries and fix them. Or if you want to work with, if you have somebody in your area, I would highly, highly suggest that you find somebody that you can work with locally that can help you through those injuries. I have helped people with back injuries, and I can't remember off the top of my head the specific thing that he had, but the doctors told him that he would never stand up straight again. And there's a picture on my Facebook. It's actually on my the front page of my Facebook. When he first started with me, literally his spine and his shoulders. So if his head was here, his shoulders literally look like this in the middle of his back. And by the time we were done, he was dang near standing straight up. So it is possible to help it. I don't know if there's a real way to permanently fix scoliosis, but we can definitely do things to help it. So message me directly and we can go from there. Or that's my advice. Or I don't know, maybe Branos or Sean have other, specific things they can share with their experience. But in my experience, I would highly suggest working with somebody.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think on that level, you really need to listen to a professional. And this goes back to that same place I started early off. If somebody is, sometimes if you don't have somebody that is telling you, not what you want, but giving you all your options, then you need to move on. You need to get that second opinion. You need to get that third opinion. Okay, I've had 3 different shoulder doctors, and the last one said exactly what the previous one did, that my right shoulder has no cartilage in it anymore. So the answer is shoulder replacement. With shoulder replacement, most things are done. I went to a doctor and he gave me other options, and there are other options. It's not permanent fixes because there is no fix or cartilage, but it allows me to manage what I do now without the incredible amounts of pain that's associated with what's gone on in that shoulder. I had, at 20 some years old, or my first shoulder surgery, early 20s, doctor came out, he's like, wow, you have so much arthritis in your shoulder. It's amazing. You look like a 50-year-old. And that was probably from my martial arts background prior to that. But 30 some years later, or 25 years later after that, shoulders are still working. I still participated. I was still doing things in a sport. It's not impossible. Just beware. There's, the difference between sometimes a doctor is you go in, I'm hurting. The first thing they say is don't do it. Stop this for X number of weeks. You go to an orthopedic person, they'll talk a little bit more. In fact, sometimes they'll be like, why don't you just drop your weights and do it so that you're not in. And I really loved your idea of pain level tolerance. If you're in that space where you're like, whoo, this is a 5 or a 6, maybe I need to drop weight, or cut the whole thing off. But if this, like, I can still do it, it's uncomfortable, but I don't increase my level of pain after I'm done, then you might be in a place where, you can stay nice and low, work through it. Hopefully that pain will start going away. But you have to manage that, and even better, you can find somebody to help you manage that and help you fix the root of the problem. So beware of that. The other piece I just wanted to add is talking about your hips and your back. Those are really, your core is critically important to everything you do. And I tease people around here what we call duck butt, and that is where your hips should be nice and square. And a lot of times what happens is people will tend to turn their hips under them, and then their butt comes up. And what's happening is, as you turn those hips, you're now here, I can do this. I turn this here, now I'm doing this. And this is what's happening inside your body. That means if my hips are facing the ground, your shoulders, now you have to curve your back to actually throw a high shot. That is not what you want. You want those hips nice and square and flat. So when you turn, you can throw that normal shot. All right. And then if your hips are way too much under you, it isn't usually a problem actually, but I do see this with some fighters that have really good hip rotation, but sometimes I'll pull them underneath them. Now what's happening is you're shifting high, and you're kind of shifting your angles up into the top, but you're losing power. So be careful there, because then you're going to arch your back to get your sword. You get that power, try to go back into the right space. So the best you can do is watch where your hips and make sure those hips are nice and square and flat to the ground, so that you don't have to curve your spine. And in fact, to give you a feel how that works, and this happens with people who just stand and throw a stick. You know, they stand straight legged. Your back is naturally arched, right? So if I kneel down, I can be like this. As soon as I stand up, all of a sudden, what happens is your back gets arched, because now you can't have your hips are being forced, because your knees are straight. So you got to be a little careful. You have to have some bend in those knees. The bend in the knees will also help your knees with knee pain and relieve, getting in a space where you're not over twisting a knee.
Thank you for that. I know that we are working within limited time constraints, and so we're going to take one more question. For any questions that we haven't had a chance to get to, by all means, please listen to this advice, talk to a medical professional. A lot of questions just can't be answered as they're very specific to you. So we do have a question though, moving on. Do you have any advice regarding shoulder strain that occurs with a center grip shield on that side and holding the weight away from your body? So any advice on strain from holding center grip shields away from your body?
I'll go ahead and start with this one. So this goes back to that arm and moment thing that we were talking about, right? If you have a load on your hand, the further away your hand gets from your body, the heavier that load is going to become. So one of the things that I do when I'm fighting with center grip, well, first off, I'm typically a heater fighter. I fight with a strapped heater. And one of the things that I do is I want to make sure that my elbow is in by my core, like Attilius was talking about earlier, because I can, if I can keep my elbow into the core, that's going to relieve a lot of the stress that typically goes into the shoulder there. So when I have my my heater, I actually have it strapped right about here, and I do what I refer to as body blocking, where I don't chase with my shield. I'm not going to punch my shield out and chase things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it in one position, and I'm going to rotate my body, bend my knees, turn at the waist, to be able to catch the blows as they come in. When I fight a center grip shield, I'll kind of do the same thing, where I'll keep my elbow in here, because you can extend your hand out a certain amount here to get that cone of defense. The further away the shield gets from your body, the greater coverage you have. But if you're holding your arm straight out here like this, again, with the amount of weight on there, even if your shield is Maybe if you only have like a 5-pound shield, if you're holding it out of the full extension, that's going to put all that strain right there on your shoulder. But if you can keep it, if you can keep your elbow in closer to your core, then you have a little more room here. And then if you add some body blocking to that as well, you can get the coverage that you need, and you can get the defense that you need without putting a lot of strain on your shoulder.
Real quick on that notion, I've been fighting center grip for, well, since my shoulder froze. I was a heater fighter in my first 2 crowns that I won, which probably over 10 years, by the way. I went to center grip, but I use it very much like a heater. It's near my body until I want it to broaden and extend that cone of defense. One thing to remember, and I see this happen all the time, there's 2 pieces I really want to talk about on center boss. One is we tend to, people around you tend to fight the same thing you do. So we have a lot of center grip people in my area now. Be careful on starting them with a shield that's too heavy. Not only is it going to be a shorter practice for them right away, but it may get to a point where you hurt their shoulders because they're going to try to keep it up there as long as possible, and they'll go beyond their capacity. And then we're back into that problem. So we tend to have, I have some, little thicker than 1/4 inch plastic heaters that weigh near nothing. And I start them in those. And then as they go on, I have one that's a little thicker, and they use that. And then they transition into a shield that allows, they're like, oh, I want something heavier because this shield's flying around all over the place. And then they transition into a real shield. They've had a time to train and strengthen, like we talked before. And that allows them to go through without injury and also without disappointment of, I can't hold this shield up constantly. And that's for a lot of people, it's like, I can hold it up for 2 minutes. Well, that's, they're only going to do that so many times. So sometimes having different equipment will help that scenario. Second piece on the center grip. One thing that is, and I'm going to show you in my dinner bowl. I apologize. So this is the boss. A lot of people mount their handle on the outside, flat on the shield. And your hand is actually outside the center line of your shield, which causes it to tilt forward, which means you have to have energy to hold it there all the time. You're stressing that shoulder all the time to try to pull it back because it tends to fall forward. By mounting that hand inside the bowl, what I usually do is I take and cut half of the handle. So half the handle's in, half the handle's out. And now that center line runs right through your hand. You don't have the top falling anymore. So now I could hold a shield, in fact, I do often, without ever closing my fingers. And that I'm in total relaxation. And that shield just sticks straight up and down. This is where you want to be. As soon as you have to hold it from, that tilt, because you don't want stuff to come in behind it, then you're going to have an issue because you're manipulating that shield. So try to do things. In fact, somebody just brought one real quick. Oh, it's green. It's wonderful. They can't see it. That's awesome. So, but beware, by mounting that handle in a little bit more, it allows for that center line and your hand just to rest in there and be in natural form. The more you rest your shield, the less stress it is on your shoulder, and the less wear and tear you have on that shoulder as well.
Achilles, do you have anything to
add? Not really. I mean, if you're having issues holding a center held, then obviously you could go back to that pyramid we were talking about earlier and look into strength balance a little bit, and maybe strengthen up that shoulder a little bit more. But really, you guys already nailed it on the head. If it's heavy out here, when it's straight out, bend that elbow a little bit and get it off that shoulder, get it back into your bicep, tricep area. And then whenever you're at rest, suck it in as close as you can. So it's resting on your core or resting on your frame would be a better way to put it versus on strictly into that shoulder. So that's all I got.
All right.
All right, so I believe we are right at the end of our planned episode. Just a couple parting words. If one of you, Duke Sean possibly, Duke Brownos, would you let everybody know a little bit about the Coach's Corner and how to find you?
Yeah, so Coach's Corner is a group that we put together to the main focus of the Coach's Corner is to make training more available for our sport so that we can train better, train our sport better, which obviously leads to longevity, and I think it makes it more accessible to a wider audience. Makes it easier for people that don't have an athletic background to excel well in our sport. If we teach our sport better. And I know that's something I've been trying to do over the last 15 years is not really changing the content that we're teaching, but I'm trying to change the way that we teach our sport because we've been teaching it really poorly for 50 years. And so we're trying to teach it better. Between me and Branos, a couple other guys who've been doing this worldwide for a long time. We're trying to pull together to make those resources available to everybody, and so it's been a lot of fun. We really appreciate everybody tuning in. So, Branos, you got anything more on that?
Yeah, I just want to say you hit the nail on the head there. I'd like to thank Attilius for coming and educating me as well. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, even though you won't put me on your show. He's asked. That's on me. I'll take that one. And then it was on him because his wife went into labor. So we do have a class coming up on his. We'll work that time out. I did actually research and put a 5 ideas together, and we're going to go through those things. Vesper, you're just awesome. I can't say it enough, and I know so many other people have said it. I don't know. I'm gonna have to send you a giant gift or something. So
yeah, we definitely appreciate what you're doing.
Thank
and
you.
I'd like to thank Attilius for joining us tonight, giving us your expertise with your background. Really appreciate that. It's been some great information. So definitely look forward to having you back.
And
Absolutely.
Attilius, do you mind letting people know how to reach you in case they have some specific medical questions for you before reaching out to a doctor?
Yep, sure. You guys can find me, Attilius Primus Castus on Facebook. If you're friends with Duke Branos, Vesper, Duke Sean, any of the people in this video, just look through their friends list and you can find me that way. Or if you don't want to go through Facebook, you can email me at Corey, COREY .Peterson, PETERSON CPT @gmail.com. And you can just email me directly and I'll get it. So, and that goes for, I mean, if I don't know how to help you, I know somebody that can. So we can get you guys out of pain one way or another. And if those guys don't know how to help you, the people that I know, that's when you're going to have to go to a doctor. But I would definitely go through all the avenues that you can before you go under the knife. And I'm sure Branos could talk about that again for
I am with
9
you,
hours.
man. Yeah,
So,
I tried to find a witch doctor. That didn't work either.
so feel free to reach out. Like I said before, to toot my own horn for just a second, I am planning on doing some more personal training-esque videos and assessments via Zoom in the next couple months, especially if my job and career decide to shift like they hopefully should. But yeah, I'm planning on doing these assessments that we were talking about before, totally free of charge. And then if you guys decide you want to work with me, we go from there. So, and again, if I can't do it, I definitely know somebody who can. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here. And of course, thank you to everybody watching. We could not do this without everybody working together. So hopefully we will see everybody again next Friday for a new topic. We'll be sure to post that and promote that. I hope you all have a lovely evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.